My name is Walter Hughes. I turned 72 last fall, though I don't count the birthdays anymore. Not since the day my own flesh and blood told me I didn't belong in his house. My wife Linda and we were thrown out like worn shoes. After all we gave, all we built, it ended with a shut door and silence. Now we sleep wherever. The wind doesn't bite too hard. Sometimes behind a grocery store. Sometimes under the bridge where the streetlights flicker like dying hope. But don't feel sorry for us yet. Because this isn't just a story about pain. It's a story about what happens when the world breaks you, and how sometimes it gives you one last chance to stand taller than ever before. Before I tell you what happened, how we ended up with nothing and how a single piece of paper changed everything, I want to know something. Tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you watching this video from? I want to see how far our story reaches. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to share is something no one ever saw coming. Let's go back to where it all started, to the day my son told me to get out. It was a Tuesday. Funny how I still remember that. The sky was the kind of grey that feels heavier than rain. Linda was in the kitchen making tea, humming the same hymn she used to sing when Greg was a baby. That house, we'd lived in it for almost 10 years. Not ours, no. It belonged to Greg and his wife Camille. After I had a stroke and Linda's knees gave out, we sold our little place and moved in with them, not out of choice, but out of necessity. I thought we'd spend our last years surrounded by family. I thought I'd die with my son at my side. That morning, Greg didn't look like my son. He stood in the doorway like a stranger wearing my boy's face. "Dad, we need to talk," he said. No smile, no warmth, just that rehearsed voice, like he'd been coached. Camille wasn't far behind, arms crossed, lips pursed, like she couldn't wait for me to stop existing. "There's just not enough room here anymore. It's too much. You and Mom, you'll be fine. There's shelters, programs, you'll figure it out." I stared at him, trying to understand what I was hearing. "You mean leave?" I asked. My voice cracked. Linda came out holding 2 mugs. She froze. Greg couldn't even look her in the eye. Camille rolled her eyes and muttered something like, "They should have planned better." He didn't wait for an answer. 2 trash bags, our whole lives, sat at the foot of the stairs. Old clothes, 1 photo album, my blood pressure pills. That's all. They didn't even offer a ride. Just a good luck and the slow closing of a door. That was once our front porch. I remember the sound. That soft final click of the door behind us. It echoed in my chest for days. We stood on the sidewalk not knowing where to go. Cars passed like we were invisible, and in a way I guess we were. Old people don't make noise when they break. We just fold into ourselves. Linda slipped her arm through mine, and for the first time in 48 years of marriage, I felt her hand tremble. We walked for hours. No destination, no plan. Just 2 old souls with tired hearts, dragging trash bags that no longer felt like possessions, but anchors to a life that no longer wanted us. And that night, we slept behind a pawn shop, using old coats for pillows and silence for a lullaby. The first week on the street stripped us of whatever pride we had left. People think losing your home happens all at once, but the real loss unfolds in layers. That first night we lay down behind that pawn shop, Linda curled against me like she used to back when we were young and poor, but still had dreams to chase. Now it was different. The cold wasn't just in the air, it was in our bones, in the silence between us. I remember watching the neon Cash for Gold sign flicker above us, while my back pressed against the wall, and I kept wondering if Greg even thought about where we were, if he pictured us like this, or if to him we'd already become shadows, things better left forgotten. The next morning Linda woke up with frost, crusting the edge of her hair. She coughed for nearly 5 minutes straight. I rubbed her back, helpless. We'd been through sickness before, but this was something crueler. There were no walls, no heat, no phone to call the doctor. Just cracked pavement, half-eaten pastries in the trash bin, and the ache of old bones, trying to carry on for no good reason. I walked 3 blocks and stood outside a gas station until the cashier stopped making eye contact and just left the day-old hot dogs on the counter. That's how it begins. You don't beg with words. You beg with your eyes, with your presence, with your silence. Linda couldn't walk far anymore. Her right knee had been bone on bone for years, but we could never afford the surgery, even when I still had insurance. I tried, finding places for her to rest, behind the church, near the bus depot, once even inside a laundromat that was kind enough to stay open all night. She never complained, not once. She'd look at me, still calling me my love, and ask if I was okay. Imagine that. After everything, she was still worrying about me. I tried to laugh sometimes, just to give her something soft to hold on to. But laughter felt like a dead language out there. Most people passed by without seeing us. A few dropped coins, like they were feeding pigeons. Others clutched their purses tighter, thinking we were addicts or thieves. That's what hurt the most, not just the hunger, not just the cold, but being erased. Society doesn't kill you, it forgets you, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. Once we saw a young couple eating sandwiches on a park bench. The woman left half of hers beside the trash. I waited until they were gone, then grabbed it. Linda and I split it, like it was steak. She took one bite and cried, not because it was delicious, but because it had mayo, her favorite, and she hadn't tasted it in weeks. I felt something crack inside me then, something small but sharp, and I knew it would never fully heal. We bathed in public restrooms when we could. Sometimes I'd sneak her into the women's bathroom when no one was around, guarding the door while she wiped herself down with paper towels. There was dignity in the little things, clean hands, dry socks, a combed head of hair. You cling to that when you've got nothing else. We met others too, folks like us. A man named Darryl who used to be a trucker. A woman called Rose who sang lullabies to a doll because she'd lost her baby years ago and never let go. We weren't alone, but we were still lonely. Some nights Linda would whisper stories to me about our early days in Oklahoma, about Greg's second-grade play, about her mother's peach cobbler. She did it to keep me from losing my mind, to remind us that we had lived a life once, a real one, not this. And in all those nights, beneath street lamps and sirens, I'd stare up at the sky and pray, not for money, not for food, not even for a home, just for one more day. One more day where my wife could sleep without fear. One more day where someone would look at us and see people, not problems. One afternoon, while sitting outside the drugstore, hoping to earn enough change for a sandwich, I saw a girl walking toward us. Blonde pigtails, pink shoes, tiny backpack bouncing behind her. I blinked twice, not trusting my eyes. It was Lily, my granddaughter, Greg's little girl. She must have recognized me too, because she gasped, then ran like her heart knew something. Her mind couldn't explain. "Grandpa!" she cried, arms full of a lunchbox. She fumbled, opened to reveal cookies, crackers, a juice box, and a crumpled note with a smiley face drawn in crayon. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. Linda was crying beside me, holding Lily's hand, like it was the last rope keeping her from drowning. "Why are you sitting here?" Lily asked, eyes wide. Before I could answer, a black SUV screeched to a halt, and out stepped Camille like winter in human form. Her heels clicked, like gunshots on the pavement. She yanked Lily away without a word, glaring at us like we were disease. The car door slammed, tires screeched, and just like that, she was gone again. But the juice box was still in my lap, and the note, we kept that note. After Lily was taken from our arms like we were poison, something shifted in Linda. I watched her shrink into herself over the next few days, quieter, slower, her eyes more glass than fire. She stopped humming in the mornings. That broke me in a way I didn't expect. You see, Linda's voice was the only music I had left, and when it went silent, the world turned grayscale. I tried everything, found her half a donut someone had tossed near the gas station, wrapped her feet in clean socks I found on a fence, even stole a hotel towel so she'd have something soft to rest her head on. But it wasn't the hunger or the cold that was killing her. It was the shame. The shame of knowing our son wouldn't let his own parents step foot inside his house. The shame of being treated like we were no longer useful, no longer needed, like we'd expired. And no matter how many times I told her, I still saw the same woman I married in 1969. The same smile, the same courage. She'd just looked past me like she was already halfway gone. One night I held her close under the awning of an abandoned mattress store, while thunder rolled above us and water dripped through a crack in the ceiling. She had a fever. Her breath was shallow and she was murmuring things I couldn't understand. That was the night I thought I might lose her. I didn't pray for her to live. I prayed that if she had to die, she'd do it somewhere, warmer than this. Somewhere with dignity. The next morning we walked 2 miles to the hospital, but they turned us away because we didn't have insurance, and her condition wasn't severe enough. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and walked out, like a man who still had options. But the truth is, I had none. That afternoon, with $2.17 left between my coat pocket and a flattened soup can we'd used to collect change, I did something ridiculous. We were outside a gas station, the kind where the lights flicker in the daytime and the smell of cigarettes lives in the walls. There was a lottery poster taped to the window. 50 million, it said in big yellow letters. I stared at it for a while. I wasn't thinking about money, not really. I was thinking about fate, about how the world seems to crush some people until they vanish, and then, sometimes, it blinks. I looked at Linda, sitting on the curb, her hands wrapped around her knees, her skin paler than I'd ever seen it. I didn't know if she had a week left, maybe less. And I thought, if this is all we get, this life, this suffering, then maybe fate owes us one moment. Just one. So I went inside and bought a lottery ticket. One single ticket. The clerk looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. That dollar could have bought a stale muffin, but I was gambling on something bigger than bread. I tucked the ticket into the pocket of Linda's coat without telling her. It stayed there for 2 days. We forgot about it. There were more urgent things: finding clean water, looking for a free clinic, asking the church volunteers if they had any medication. We didn't care about dreams anymore. We were too busy trying not to die. But on the 3rd day, we ended up at a community center for lunch. One of those places that gives you a bowl of soup and a slice of bread and reminds you gently that you still exist. There was a TV in the corner playing the evening news. I wasn't paying attention until I heard the numbers. The woman reading them had that fake news anchor smile, like the world wasn't burning behind her eyes. She read them out loud once, then again. I don't know why, but something about the way she said them stuck. I turned to Linda and said, "Do you still have that ticket in your coat?" She looked confused, then dug into her inner pocket and pulled it out, creased, soft, almost forgotten. I read the numbers twice, then 3 times. My hands started shaking. Not the way they do when I'm cold, but the way they did when I first held Greg as a newborn. "Linda," I whispered, "I think we just won the damn lottery." She stared at me, not understanding. Then I showed her the screen, the numbers. Every single one matched. Every single one. And just like that, everything changed. You'd think everything changes the moment you realize you're holding a ticket worth $50 million. And in some ways, it does. The fear starts to melt, but it leaves behind something else, something stranger. A numbness. A disbelief so strong, it feels like a second kind of poverty. We didn't laugh. We didn't scream or hug or cry. We just sat there, frozen on a plastic bench, while the rest of the soup kitchen went on around us, no one knowing that 2 of the poorest people in the building had just become 2 of the richest in the country. I held Linda's hand like it was a lifeline and whispered, "Don't let go." She didn't. We didn't say anything else for a long while. The next steps were quiet, careful. We walked to the nearest police station, not to announce our win, but because it was the only place we felt safe. We asked for a ride to the lottery office downtown. They looked at us like we were crazy, like maybe we were senile or confused or both. But one of the younger officers, a man named Barry, took us seriously. He drove us there himself, didn't even ask for gas money. That's the thing about real kindness. It shows up when no one's watching. We signed papers in a back room that smelled like coffee and cardboard. A woman in a blue suit asked if we wanted the lump sum. We just nodded. Our hands were still trembling. They offered us financial advisors, lawyers, press management. Suddenly, everyone wanted to help. But for us, the help we needed was simpler. Warm beds, clean clothes, a home, a place to start over. The first thing we did was check into a hotel. A real one, not a shelter, not a cot. I remember that night so clearly. Linda took the longest shower I've ever seen, then fell asleep with the towel wrapped around her head and the remote in her hand. I sat beside her, just listening to her breathe. For the first time in months, it didn't sound like a death rattle. It sounded like peace. I didn't even sleep that night. I just kept looking at her, thinking we made it. Somehow, God or fate or luck gave us one more shot. The next few weeks were a blur. Buying a small house, a used car, finally getting Linda's knees treated by a surgeon who called her Ma'am and smiled like she was worth the time. I bought a simple coat, just like the one I used to wear before the world swallowed us whole. But money, I soon realized, doesn't stitch up everything. It doesn't erase betrayal. It doesn't soften the memory of sleeping under bridges or being looked at like trash. And most of all, it doesn't change what happened with Greg. Still, we knew we had to see him. Not to rub it in, not even to gloat. We just needed answers, closure, or maybe just the truth, face to face. So one morning, Linda wore her new Sunday dress, and I put on the only tie I owned, and we drove back to the same house where it all ended, the same house where my son had once taken his first steps. The door hadn't changed. The paint was chipped. Camille answered, of course. She looked surprised, then annoyed, then nervous. Greg came to the door behind her, and when he saw us, he froze. Not with joy, with guilt. That alone was enough for me. I didn't need an apology anymore, just recognition. I told him everything, where we'd been, how we'd lived, how close Linda had come to dying. I told him about Lily, about the juice box, about the note, and then I told him about the lottery. I watched his face change, first shock, then calculation, and finally, something like shame. "We didn't know," he mumbled. Camille tried to speak, but Linda raised her hand, and for the first time in decades her voice carried like thunder. "You knew," she said. "You just didn't care. We didn't stay long, we didn't need to. Some things once broken don't need fixing, they just need to be walked away from." I left Greg with one sentence: "You may be my blood, but that doesn't make you my family." And we walked back to our car. I didn't look back. Money changes everything, but it also reveals who people truly are. The day our win hit the news, our quiet hotel was suddenly swarmed with cameras, microphones, and morning show invitations. Strangers from towns I'd never even heard of sent us letters, emails, sometimes prayers, but more often requests. Old neighbors who never said a word to us when we were sleeping on cardboard suddenly remembered us as family friends. People knocked on our door, offering investment opportunities. Some crying, some begging, some smiling with teeth that hid knives. I tried to shield Linda from it all. She was still recovering from her surgery, still learning how to walk without pain. But the world didn't care. They saw an old couple with money, and that made us targets. One man stood out. Smooth talker called himself Victor Grant, said he was a retired attorney, and now did philanthropic wealth advising. He had business cards, clean shoes, and a voice that dripped honey. At first, he seemed helpful. He offered to manage some of our affairs, helped us get a nicer home in a quiet neighborhood, even helped us hire a housekeeper. I should have known. One night I saw him in the garage on the phone, whispering. The way he glanced over his shoulder, it didn't sit right. I went through the paperwork the next morning and saw he had slipped in access to one of our accounts. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know his kindness had claws. I confronted him quietly, alone. Told him I wasn't the old fool he thought I was. I said, "You think just because I once begged for bread that I don't know what a vulture smells like?" He smiled at first, then left that night. No apology, no explanation, just vanished. We called the bank, froze everything, spoke to real lawyers. He hadn't gotten far, but he had tried. That realization hit harder than it should have, that even now, after all we'd been through, we were still being hunted. Not for our lives, but for our hope. That was the moment I truly understood. We weren't fighting poverty anymore. We were fighting to stay human in a world that only values what's in your wallet. About a month after, we settled into our new home. Nothing too big, just a cozy 2-bedroom near a park with tall trees and clean sidewalks. Linda received something in the mail that made her knees buckle all over again. It was a small pink envelope, barely sealed, no return address, the handwriting crooked and uneven. At first, I thought it was junk mail. Linda turned it over and froze. She didn't say a word. She just stared at it, her hands trembling like they used to in the winter. I took it from her and opened it slowly. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, with scribbled drawings of flowers and stick figures at the bottom. And a letter. Dear Grandma and Grandpa, I miss you. I cried when Mummy said, I can't talk to you anymore. I wanted to come visit. But Daddy said, you moved far away. I hope you're not sick. I don't tell anyone, but I keep the juice box in my room. Mummy says, you're bad people. But I don't think that's true. I saw Mummy hit Daddy again and scream and throw my cereal bowl. I hid in the closet like last time. Please don't tell. I love you both. Love, Lily. I couldn't speak. Linda was already crying, not softly, but the kind of cry that folds your body like grief mixed with fury. We read the letter 3 times. Each word was a knife, not just because of what it said, but because it meant Lily still remembered us. She still loved us. Even after everything Greg and Camille had told her. And buried inside her letter was a truth we hadn't known, that Greg was living in a house full of fear and violence, and Lily was the one caught in the storm. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hand, and I realized we couldn't just move on, we couldn't pretend we had peace when the only person who ever showed us love in that family was trapped in a home that had no warmth. Linda and I didn't argue. We didn't need to. We knew. We had to do something. We had to protect her. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in our safe, and called a lawyer the next morning. We were no longer just survivors. Now, we were going to fight. The day we walked into that courthouse, I wasn't nervous. I was angry. Calm, but angry. Not the kind that makes you yell, the kind that settles in your chest like a slow fire and keeps you standing, even when your legs want to quit. Linda wore a simple black dress and held the original letter from Lily in her purse. Our attorney, a good-hearted woman named Ruth Santiago, had built our case with quiet fury. She told us we weren't just filing for visitation rights. We were going for emergency guardianship, and that meant dragging Greg and all his dirty history into the light. I had no hesitation. None. My son stopped being my son the moment he let his own child cry herself to sleep in a closet while his wife shattered dishes across the floor. And so we sat in front of a judge in a courtroom that smelled of varnished wood and dust, and we listened as Greg's attorney painted him as a family man under stress, and painted us as elderly individuals acting emotionally after coming into money. That was their angle, that we were overreacting, bitter, maybe even mentally unstable. I almost laughed, but Ruth didn't flinch. She stood and calmly laid out our lives. The betrayal, the months on the streets, the sudden rise, and finally, the letter. When she handed it to the judge, the room went still, and then came the real twist. Ruth had dug deeper. She had tracked down financial records, old bank transfers, a dusty paper trail from a decade ago. And there it was, proof that Greg had siphoned nearly $30,000 from my late brother's estate after his death. I'd never known. Greg was the executor. We'd trusted him. And he doctored the records, claimed the estate was smaller, and pocketed the rest. The judge looked at him long and hard. Greg couldn't meet his eyes. Camille whispered something, but her face was already crumbling. Then came the nail in the coffin. A former neighbor testified that they'd heard shouting inside Greg's house almost every week. And more than once they'd seen Lily playing alone in the driveway, barefoot and crying. The judge recessed for 10 minutes. I didn't move. Linda held my hand so tight I could feel her pulse. When court resumed, the judge didn't raise his voice or make a speech. He just looked at Greg and said, "You may share blood with your parents, but you've given this court every reason to believe that your daughter is safer with them than with you." And just like that, we won. Legal guardianship, not shared, not conditional, full custody. But the celebration never came. Because right as the judge signed the order, Ruth got a call from our private investigator, the one we'd hired just in case. Lily was gone, taken from school hours earlier. Camille's car was missing, and no one knew where they were. When Ruth whispered the words, "Lily's gone," I didn't feel the floor vanish beneath me. I felt the world narrow, like my vision turned to a single burning pinhole. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could see was Lily's face, those soft eyes, the way she called me Grandpa, like the words still meant something. The courthouse noise faded into silence. Camille had taken her. That much was clear. It was her car missing from the driveway, her voice heard arguing on the school intercom before Lily was signed out, under a fake story about a family emergency. I asked if Greg knew where she'd gone. He swore up and down he didn't, and for the first time I believed him. He looked sick, ashen. He didn't even ask for custody back. Maybe he finally saw the monster he'd married. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was finding that little girl. The police opened a case immediately. Amber Alert. Roadblocks. Calls. Photos. But every hour felt like a year. Linda didn't eat, didn't sleep. She just sat by the phone with the letter in her lap, praying in a whisper I hadn't heard since her mother died. The news picked it up fast. Lottery-winning grandparents file for custody, then child vanishes. They turned it into a headline, but it was our nightmare. I reviewed security footage from gas stations, called every motel in a 200-mile radius, offered rewards. We hired a private investigator, a young man named Clay, who had once been homeless himself. He didn't wear a tie or promise miracles. But he looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't care about your money, I'll find her." And for the first time in days, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. Days passed, then a week. Camille's phone was off, her credit cards untouched. It was like she had vanished into the air. But Clay was smarter than that. He noticed something buried in one of Lily's letters, a hand-drawn picture of a cabin, with a swing outside and a red mailbox. "This isn't imaginary," he told me. "She's seen it before." We cross-checked real estate records, even found an old hunting cabin. Camille had inherited from a distant uncle in her maiden name, a property never listed in the divorce documents, never tied to her publicly. And it was in the mountains, hours away, with no neighbors for miles. I didn't wait for the police. I packed a bag, handed Linda my phone and told her, "I'm bringing her home." I wasn't afraid. I'd already survived hell once, and this time I was walking straight into the fire to get her back. The drive to the mountains felt like it took a lifetime. Each mile dragged behind the last, like the weight of every mistake we'd all made. The road twisted through trees, so thick they swallowed the light. I followed Clay's directions to the letter. Dirt paths, turn-offs with no signs, one narrow wooden bridge that creaked under the weight of my car. My hands didn't shake, not once. I'd buried that fear. I had one mission now, get Lily back, no matter what waited for me. At the end of that road, I spotted the red mailbox first. Rusted, leaning sideways, the paint peeling but still holding on. Then I saw the cabin, a squat little thing tucked between pine trees, its windows dark, its porch covered in leaves. A single swing creaked slowly in the breeze, and then I saw her. Lily, sitting on the steps, arms around her knees, head resting on her arms. Alone. My breath caught, but I didn't move. I didn't want to scare her. I stepped out quietly, called her name, just once. She looked up, and when her eyes met mine, she ran. Not away. To me. She didn't say a word, just buried herself in my chest and held on, like she was trying to become part of me. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, "I've got you. I've got you now, baby girl. Grandpa's here." But then the door opened. Camille stood in the doorway, pale, thinner, her hair a mess, a suitcase at her feet. She wasn't holding a weapon. She wasn't yelling. She looked broken and lost. I expected a fight, but she just stared at me and said, "I didn't know where else to go." I told Lily to go sit in the car. She obeyed quietly. Then I looked at Camille, this woman who had made my life hell, who had poisoned my son, who had tried to erase us. And I saw something I didn't expect. Fear, not of me, of herself, of what she'd become. "They were going to take her from me," she whispered. Everyone takes everything from me. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I just told her the truth. You lost her the moment you made her afraid to be a child. Camille sank to the floor and didn't get back up. Clay had followed behind and called the sheriff. They arrived within minutes. Camille didn't run. She didn't protest. She was arrested quietly, and as they led her away, I looked at her one last time and said, "You could have been better. We all could have. But you had a little girl who loved you, and you chose hate instead." She didn't respond. That night I drove Lily home. She fell asleep in the back seat with her stuffed rabbit and the crayon drawing of the cabin still in her hand. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. The fight was over, and we had her back. They say money changes everything. Maybe it does. But sitting here now with the sun warming my shoulders and Lily's laughter echoing through the yard, I can tell you, peace changes more. Not the kind that comes from silence or distance, but the kind you earn, the kind you bleed for, the kind that costs you years, pride, and sometimes even the people you once thought you'd die protecting. It's been 6 months since we brought Lily home. Not to a mansion, not to a palace, just a modest blue house at the edge of town with a white fence and a garden Linda tends to every morning with aching knees and a soft hum in her throat. The kind of house that feels like a hug when you walk through the door. We didn't keep all the money, didn't need it. We paid off every medical debt we ever had, bought the house in full, set aside enough for Lily's future, and then the rest we gave away. Quietly. To the church that fed us, when we were nobodies. To the shelter that once let us sleep near the heater. To other old souls who were still out there, bent and ignored, wearing coats too thin for the wind. We started a small foundation, just a name really, called the Forgotten Hands Fund. Not for glory, not for press, just because we remember what it feels like to disappear. As for Greg, I don't know where he is now. I heard he moved away, changed jobs. Camille is still in custody. He never reached out again, and I'm done reaching back. Some doors, once closed, don't need reopening. But Lily, she's thriving. Her nightmares come less now. She runs to school with her backpack bouncing and returns with drawings of our family, always 3 figures holding hands under a tree. She calls me Grandpa again, calls Linda Grandma. Sometimes she crawls into our bed at night and sleeps between us, like a puzzle piece we never knew was missing. And Linda, she hums again. She sings when she bakes, when she folds laundry, when she brushes Lily's hair. That hum, it's my favorite sound in the world. I sit on the porch some nights, just me and the stars, and I think about all the turns this life has taken. About the son who betrayed me. About the nights we shivered behind dumpsters. About the lottery ticket folded in a coat pocket. About the juice box and a note scrawled in crayon that saved everything. And I realize I'm not rich because of the money. I'm rich because I've been broken, burned, discarded, and somehow I'm still here. We're still here. And this time, we're not invisible. We're not begging. We're just living fully, gently, and finally free.